Some days I feel like I'm trapped in a dramatic, twisted film. My former sister-in-law was responsible for the loss of my first child. Yes, you read that correctly. Yet astonishingly, she was still welcome to our next pregnancy reveal. Unbelievable, right? The story only gets wilder, involving a wedding, an abduction, and legal consequences. I never imagined my life would take such a turn. 5 years ago, Caleb and I met on a blind date. I was nervous about the setup. You know those cautionary tales. But when I met Caleb, my fears melted away. His charm and attentiveness made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He noticed the way my eyes sparkled when I teased him and how my lips curved when I was pleased. I found it sweet and genuine. I was completely enchanted and never thought I'd fall so hard. During our date, he playfully warned me that his family was a bit wild. I laughed it off, saying everyone's family is a little crazy. Big mistake. 2 years later, I was walking down the aisle to marry him. Oddly, our first major issue surfaced on our wedding day. That's when I met his brother's girlfriend, Serafina, for the first time. I was in my white gown, makeup perfectly done, still buzzing from our vows and a bit of champagne. I danced over to Serafina to say hello. I wasn't going to mention her outfit, which was almost white, since I avoid conflict. As I moved to embrace her, she shoved me back with a look of disdain. She called me embarrassing and said I craved attention. I kept dancing, but she continued, saying I was lucky Caleb had such low standards, because if he were like his brother Ethan, he'd have hit me for even approaching him. What? Why would anyone boast about their partner being violent? I ignored her and kept dancing, which might explain what happened next. Perhaps she had issues, but moments later, she returned with a glass of wine. She threw it, ruining my wedding dress. Then, out of nowhere, she said she knew Caleb and I wanted kids and hoped I'd never have any. It was bizarre. Why did she hate me? I wanted to break down, but I refused to let her ruin my day. I pulled myself together, slipped out back, called my friend Madeline, had her bring a spare white dress changed, and returned to the dance floor. I wasn't going to let Serafina's venom spoil my moment. I didn't tell anyone what happened, wanting to preserve the joy. I regret that now. Soon after the wedding, Caleb and I started trying for a baby. We'd always dreamed of having a child, and now, as a married couple, we felt ready. A few months later, I was pregnant. Then tragedy struck. After Serafina tripped me, causing me to fall stomach first against a stair railing, I lost the baby. It was devastating. I initially thought it was an accident. Since my pregnancy wasn't yet visible, we hadn't told anyone. Now I suspect she knew. She kept asking strange questions and pushing me to drink alcohol. It was heart-wrenching. Worse, at our next doctor's visit, tests showed it was unlikely I'd conceive again. That was the first time I saw Caleb cry. No one knew the truth, but the next time I saw Serafina, she was oddly cheerful, making comments about loss and how awful it must feel. I'm still baffled that I didn't connect the dots. She caused my miscarriage and seemed to revel in it, taunting me while I was clueless. Months later, fortune smiled on us and I became pregnant again. Caleb and I wept with joy and he knelt to kiss my belly. Before I knew it, he was calling out of work to take me to dinner. "My baby needs food," he said, grinning. "And this baby needs food too." We hadn't seen or told our families, but we had a plan. With my best friend Madeline's help, we created a beautiful nursery for our daughter. After hitting the 12-week mark, a major milestone, we decided to share the news with our families. We invited them for a cozy dinner at our home. That evening, our house buzzed with family warmth and chatter. Ethan and Serafina acted like infatuated teens, constantly touching, kissing, and making noises that were hard to ignore in a room full of people. It made me uneasy, and I wasn't the only one. Still, I was determined not to let it ruin our special moment. As dinner began, Caleb and I shared a look, silently agreeing it was time. We stood, and Caleb cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. "We have big news to share," he said, beaming. I held up the ultrasound pictures I'd been saving, smiling widely as I announced, "We're expecting." The room erupted in excitement. Everyone leapt up to hug us, offer congratulations, and share our happiness. Caleb's parents, Vivian and Henry, were overjoyed. This would be their first grandchild, and their pride shone through. They knew how much we'd been through. Vivian, tears streaming down her face, asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded, my own tears falling. "More than okay," I said. My brother and his wife embraced Caleb and me, thrilled about our journey into parenthood. They offered advice and support for first-time parents. I confessed my fears about overthinking every choice. My brother said he'd felt the same before his daughter was born, and his wife agreed. In that moment, only family love and support mattered. Everything felt perfect as Caleb and I shared our dreams with our loved ones. But Serafina stood out, sitting still in her chair, glaring at us with clear hostility. Her demeanor unnerved me. When Ethan came to congratulate me, I quietly asked about her behavior. As the evening moved to the living room for dessert and drinks, I avoided alcohol and so did Caleb. We settled in, and the conversation turned to babies and pregnancy. I shared details about the nursery we designed for Charlotte, feeling proud. Serafina stayed silent, barely engaging. She remarked that our nursery was too bright for a baby to sleep in, implying we hadn't thought it through. I calmly explained we'd install blackout curtains, but she barely acknowledged me. She then questioned why we chose yellow instead of a neutral color. Surprised, I said yellow was just a color and not tied to gender. She then critiqued our carefully organized baby clothes, saying her son never liked such items and that we should have consulted other parents before buying cheap ones. Her dismissive, condescending tone shocked me. I'd been polite, expecting honesty, but this was too much. I snapped. "What are you even talking about?" I said, exasperated. Caleb and I had poured our hearts into preparing for our baby, and her words stung. She wasn't offering advice. She was deliberately ruining our joy. My mother, Vivian, and mother-in-law entered the nursery as Serafina prepared to respond, gushing over the room. Their praise briefly eased the tension. But I couldn't let it go. "What exactly did you mean?" I asked again. My mother and mother-in-law sensed the conflict and asked what was wrong. I explained how Serafina had criticized the nursery and called our baby clothes cheap. Both women were stunned that someone would be so openly negative during such a special moment. My mother-in-law chuckled and asked Serafina, "Is that true?" Caught off guard, Serafina tried to backtrack. She claimed the fabrics were too coarse and suggested softer ones, but my mother and mother-in-law weren't convinced. They shook their heads, saying the clothes felt fine. Serafina then said, as a mother, she knew better and I should accept criticism. My mother responded firmly yet calmly. "We're mothers too," she said, "and we'd never say that to you. You should know how hard it is being a first-time mom." My mother-in-law added, "This isn't okay, Serafina. There's a difference between advice and being cruel." Serafina's face reddened, realizing she was outnumbered. Offended but silent, she stormed out of the nursery. I followed to prevent a scene. Serafina went to Ethan in the living room, abruptly announcing she was leaving. Ethan, confused but sensing her distress, didn't argue. He apologized, congratulated us again, and left with her. Later, Ethan called Caleb and me to apologize for Serafina's behavior. After my mother-in-law scolded him for bringing her to such a private event, he learned the full story. I forgave Ethan, knowing he wasn't to blame. He explained that Serafina had experienced pregnancy trauma. At 16, she had a son. After marrying, she and her husband struggled with infertility, which took a toll on their mental health and led to divorce. Ethan said Serafina was sensitive about other women's pregnancies, which might explain her harsh reaction. I empathized with her pain as a woman. I understood her grief and the scars it left. But her behavior at our dinner was unacceptable. So I decided to keep my distance at future gatherings to maintain a positive environment for our growing family. When I gave birth to Charlotte, Ethan asked Caleb if he could bring Serafina to see her. Though hesitant, we agreed, hoping things might improve. It was a mistake. The moment Serafina saw Charlotte, she commented on her sparse hair, suggesting it meant she'd have thin hair forever. It felt like an attack, and I saw Caleb's frustration. Her remark was another cruel jab during a joyful moment. Ethan, sensing the tension, didn't let her stay long. After quick congratulations, they left. This year, Ethan stunned everyone by announcing his engagement to Serafina. Reactions were mixed, especially from my mother-in-law, who openly disapproved of her joining the family. She and Serafina had been clashing for months. Knowing my mother-in-law's kind nature, I suspected Serafina's actions were the issue. When Caleb called Ethan to discuss the rushed engagement, Ethan admitted Serafina was 4 months pregnant. He'd only found out 2 months prior and kept it quiet to avoid judgment before the wedding. Ethan wanted to marry her before the baby arrived, which made sense. But during wedding planning, Serafina had a meltdown while trying on dresses, unable to fit due to pregnancy weight gain. She refused Ethan's suggestion to pick a comfortable dress and insisted on postponing the wedding until a month after the baby's due date to lose weight. Though the change was frustrating, I respected their right to choose what worked for them. A month ago, Serafina gave birth to her daughter, and Caleb and I visited to offer congratulations. Caleb was chosen as Ethan's best man. We didn't want to leave Charlotte all day, so we brought her to the wedding. My mother-in-law and I planned to share childcare duties. I considered a hotel babysitter, but with growing concerns about child abductions, felt safer with family watching Charlotte. I planned to stay sober and retire early to care for her. A week before the wedding, Serafina called. She asked if I was bringing Charlotte. I confirmed and started explaining our childcare plan, but she cut me off, saying she didn't want Charlotte there. Shocked, I asked why. She said she wanted her miracle baby to be the focus and that Charlotte would steal attention. I argued that everyone already knew Charlotte, and no one could overshadow Serafina on her day, but she wouldn't budge and grew upset. She warned that if I didn't respect her wishes, I wasn't welcome. The situation escalated into a heated argument involving Serafina, Ethan, Caleb, and my mother-in-law. Ethan called me, apologizing and assuring me Charlotte was welcome. He urged me not to take Serafina's words seriously. Furious, I considered skipping the wedding, but I attended to support Caleb and keep the peace. At the ceremony, relatives couldn't stop admiring Charlotte's cuteness. Serafina shot me glares, clearly upset about Charlotte's presence, though her baby was undeniably the star, and I made no effort to draw attention. During the reception, Caleb, my mother-in-law, and I took turns watching Charlotte in our hotel room as planned. Though my mother-in-law got tipsy, Caleb and I stayed sober, focused on Charlotte. Midway through, I saw my mother-in-law, who was supposed to be with Charlotte, searching for me in a panic. My heart raced as I rushed over, Caleb close behind. Her voice shook as she whispered that Charlotte was gone. Caleb demanded answers, having just left her with his mother. She admitted Serafina had come into the room after he left. They talked briefly, and when my mother-in-law stepped away to use the bathroom, both Charlotte and Serafina were gone. Panicked, we confronted Ethan, asking where Serafina was and why she'd do this. He was as shocked as we were. Amid the celebration, we alerted hotel staff to search for them. After an hour with no sign of them, I called the police. A staff member then found Charlotte and Serafina behind the hotel. We rushed outside, terrified. Serafina sat in a chair, holding Charlotte while smoking, her baby in a carrier nearby. Tears streamed as I checked Charlotte. Caleb demanded answers. My mother-in-law, now sober and furious, yelled at Serafina for taking our daughter without permission while she was in the bathroom. Serafina smirked, saying if I cared so much, I should have respected her request not to bring Charlotte. I realized she'd taken my daughter to scare me, punishing me for defying her. Ethan tried to mediate, suggesting a misunderstanding. The police asked if I wanted to press charges. Seeing Serafina's remorseless expression, I chose to file kidnapping charges to protect my family. Serafina protested as police took her into custody. Ethan pleaded with me, but my mother-in-law called her actions unforgivable.